Welcome to the Top Business Leaders Show, powered by Rise 25 Media. We feature top founders, executives, and business leaders from all over the world.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here. I'm the host of this show, and you know, if you've listened before, that every week we have smart CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs from all kinds of companies. And if you check out the archives, we have Netflix and Grubhub and Redfin, Gusto, Kinko's, YPO, EO, Activation Blizzard, lots of great episodes for you. And of course, this episode brought to you by our company, Rise 25, where we help businesses to give to and connect to their dream relationships and partnerships. We do that by helping you to run your podcast. We are the easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. And if you want to learn more, you can go to rise25.com or email at support@rise25.com. All right. And today's guest is Odette D'Aniello. She is the founder and CEO of Celebrity Gourmet and Dragonfly Cakes, which is a family-owned and operated retail cake boutique and also a wholesale company. The company has received a number of awards, including Best of Western Washington a number of times. She has many years of experience in the food industry, including, as she will say, as a child laborer coming into the family business at a very young age in Guam. So we're going to hear about her upbringing there. And she and I are both active in Entrepreneurs Organization. We know each other through that. She's also the owner of Hamaya Garden, which is a tea house and event venue, beautiful tea house and event venue in Tucson, Arizona. Odette, it's such a pleasure to have you here today. And I want to start with your story, because your parents came to the U.S. From the Philippines to work for your uncle's bakery in Guam. You arrived in Guam, and your parents and then the kids pretty much had to work in this family bakery, slicing bread and all that kind of stuff. It was a lot of work at a young age. Take me back to that period of time and what that was like for you, coming to a new country and having to work as much as you did.
Sure. So my family came from Cebu, Philippines. My grandfather, actually my mother's uncle, started a bakery after World War II. My great uncle, granduncle, created bread or baked bread out of these like metal tin cans, like big barrels, and that's how he started his bakery. And my mother was he kind of adopted my mom, because my mom was working in the rice field. So she learned how to bake. And later on, she married my dad and then became teachers. But she couldn't make a living with having kids and earning $2 a month on a teacher salary. So she started making cakes. And the cakes that she made just became super famous in her little town. And she ended up going back to her granduncle's bakery, now run by her cousin. And she started working there. She ended up becoming the manager of that business. And that particular cousin of hers started a bakery in Guam, which is a U.S. territory, as you know. Mm-hmm. And we moved as my parents as H-1B, I think, visas. Like it was a company transfer. That's okay. We moved. And we were on these visas. So when we moved, it was me, my brother, and my little sister, who was 1 at that time. And she's currently my business partner.
And you were how old?
I was 10.
Okay.
My brother was 11. My sister was 1. We're 10 years apart. And when we arrived, the first thing that we did was go to the bakery, and we're told, this is your new job. It is slicing bread. And so from running around as free, children playing, we ended up working for my uncle's bakery. And it wasn't just us, it was also their children. So there was a lot of us children working in that bakery. And it really is like an immigrant way.
It's almost like the opposite of what the American dream is. Like the American dream of like, you come to the United States for freedom. It's almost like the opposite happened to you. Like then you suddenly had to go to work.
A lot of immigrant families, like not just Filipinos, but, any other immigrant families that are in niched industries. Yeah. A lot of the children learn the skills of the job by working with the family and working for the family. The difference between us was that we were not part of necessarily the family. We were workers. So we didn't necessarily have rest. We just worked after school. Yeah. We worked, and my first job was slicing bread, and then I taught myself how to decorate cakes because it was the the only air conditioned spot in the whole bakery. So I learned, and it was really the most fun thing to do, right?
Yeah.
You basically play with icing, and then that was a job. So I thought that was the best job ever. So at age 10, I started making cakes and
Mm.
decorating cakes. I made decorated hundreds of cakes. So yeah, it was really hard in retrospect. It was traumatic in a lot of ways because children need to play.
Yeah.
Children need to have freedom to create, etc., and not have their days full of adult work.
Right.
In that way, it was not good. But in the positive note, it was the way I learned my skill. And it's, when they say that you find your passion and your love at age 10, and, cake decorating was certainly that for me because it was also an artistic outlet.
I love to ask people about what they were like as a kid, and you mentioned that in high school you sold newspapers, you got involved in junior achievement, you wrote stories for magazines. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I didn't, well, that whole newspaper project, it was because my high school, I went to a Catholic girls' high school, and part of our project was our after school project when I was able to stay after school, when my work was done at the bakery. Um, we had a junior achievement program, and you could start a business. And I started a newspaper business, and I sold ads and made money out of it. Actually,
Nice.
it was I sold ads and candy grams. It might have been me and a couple of other girls, but it went really well. And this was like, wow, this is great. That's awesome. And then I went to college. I kept working, right,
Hmm.
at the
Hmm.
bakery. But then at the same time, I also had these side hustles where I work as a writer. I wrote for a magazine. This is before the internet, right? So I
Hmm.
worked for a local magazine. I was writing for them. I made cards. I painted on cards, and
Wow.
I sold sarongs at one time.
You had seen sarongs, I think, in the Philippines, right? Or in
No, no,
Guam?
no.
Guam.
It was in Bali.
In
So
Bali. Okay.
sarongs in the
Okay.
90s,
Okay.
the pieces of cloth that you wear, wrapped around you at the beach. And, I was living on Guam. So
Yeah.
everybody wore a sarong. But then in the US, there was no sarongs. So I would bring them and I would just sell them to my friends
Mm.
times the amount I bought them for.
You ended up, you'd never been off of Guam. You'd never been in the mainland US when you decided to go to college at University of Arizona. Is that right?
No, because we were waiting for it took a while to get our ducks in a row with getting a green card and all. Um, so after we got our green card, I went to the University of Arizona, but that
What was
was
that like for you moving to Arizona and living on the mainland after growing up in Guam?
well, I've only lived on an island. So I lived in the Cebu, which is surrounded by water, and then Guam is surrounded by water, and these are little islands. I've only lived in two islands when I was young. So when I moved to Tucson, I was shocked, first of all, because it was landlocked and it was all like full of cacti, and there were so many white people. It was culture shock for me because Guam is very diverse. There's a lot of people from all over the world who live there. It's a melting pot sort of, and I was just shocked because the
Mm.
only time that I ever really saw a lot of Caucasians were Mormons in the Philippines who taught me English, or some of my teachers in Catholic school.
Mm.
But then, it turned out to be such a beautiful experience because I met so many different people with different types of, I learned so much about the world, and it was a culture shock initially, but it was really quite I felt quite at home afterwards because
Y-
the people, when I realized that people in the mainland US at that time, I didn't realize that they were the type of people that would just tell you exactly what they meant, yes or no. There wasn't like this passive way of saying no, which is a very Asian. My culture is like, if you're saying yes, you don't say, oh, if you're saying no, you don't say no. You just say, kind of like, you know, yes.
Yes, shaking your head.
Yes, they're like,
Yeah.
no. It's like
Yeah.
a lot of mixed messages. So I
Got
like
it.
the fact that people were very direct. I very much like that because
Yeah.
I like personally, I'm a pretty direct person. I mean, I've always been a direct person, and it was
Yeah.
very hard for me growing up in a Filipino family being a direct person.
You decided to eventually start your own bakery, and you ended up moving to Washington State to do that.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
So my husband was a teacher too. Actually, after I graduated, I became a teacher, and
Runs in the family.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So my husband who's from Connecticut. He moved to Guam because there was a teacher shortage, and I met him on Guam, and he wanted to live there forever. And I was like, no, gosh, no. There's no libraries. Like, I was such a
Mm,
good reader. Like the
mm,
stores were there's one bookstore on the entire island.
mm.
I really wanted to continue on with my education because I was getting a master's degree at that time because I was a teacher. And I just wanted access to more learning and more books and more people, different types of ways of living. And, I had already traveled extensively at that time because in college, I was an exchange student. But he wanted to stay on Guam and wear slippers and, live on an
Hmm.
island for the rest of his life.
Hmm.
So we had this bet that if we both go to teach internationally, if we both got jobs then I would teach internationally for 2 years. If we didn't, then we'd move to Washington and start a life. And I got a job and he didn't.
Okay.
So we moved to Washington
Okay.
and then we started a bakery.
And then you started a bakery. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what was it like making that shift from, here you had worked in a bakery growing up and, in your words, it was kind of oppressive. You didn't get to experience that childhood. And yet here you are starting a bakery. Some people would run from that experience and never want to go back to it. And yet I guess you discovered enough love for like creating cakes that you decided to start your own or have your own bakery.
We opened a cafe.
Okay, so it wasn't a bakery first.
It wasn't going to be a bakery. It was like this cafe. My favorite restaurant was a Seventh-day Adventist restaurant in Guam. And it was a vegetarian. I was a vegetarian. I was a pretty staunch vegetarian and a vegan at some point when it wasn't hip.
Yeah.
This was not hip. This is in the 90s and nobody really was that.
Yeah.
And I thought I was just going to open this like Seventh-day Adventist type of kind of situation where you can choose your own sandwich fillings and all that. That was my big dream, and it was a really bad business model. I learned about bad business models.
The cafe was a bad business model. Why?
It was really bad.
Why?
Because it was too cheap. I had the line was out the door, but the food was too cheap. We didn't really know because I opened it with my brother and my husband. We didn't really know how to run it very well. There's a lot of perishables, a lot of it, just kind of went when your menu is so big.
So you did something right if the line was out the door. Why do you think the line was out the door?
Because it was cheap.
Okay.
I mean, it was cheap. The breads were baked fresh. The breads were baked super fresh, like every day from scratch, and you could choose your own fillings, and you can get unlimited drink for $5.
Oh wow, that's cheap.
Yeah, I'd go there every single meal of the day too if I was that person.
Yeah.
But so we weren't doing well, and the next door to us was this flower shop, and this woman would sell her flowers for like 3 roses for $25. I was like, and by this time I was like, what's the cost of goods of that? It's like, and so I realized I'm like, I think I'm going to do cakes because I ended up going to a wedding show and I met this couple and they only did cakes for a living and they were charging hundreds of dollars for it. When I grew up, cakes was just a side job. Like I wasn't the main thing. The main thing. And I was like, wait, you guys only do cakes? Like those wedding cakes? Because I can make those with my eyes closed. And they're like, yeah, this is all we do. We do it out of our garage. I'm like, you don't have overhead. You don't have rent. You don't have insurance. I was what, 28 years old. I didn't know anything about this business. And so I talked to the wedding show owner, and he said, "Well, do my show in January, and you'll never have to worry about your business again." And I charged it to my credit card, and I did it.
You charge like what, like a booth?
His show was $800.
Like, did you get a booth or something where you're
I
showing
did.
off?
I
You
got
did,
a
okay.
booth.
Like behind you right now, like that you had like
Yeah.
you had like
Yeah.
big, beautiful cakes, yeah.
Yes.
And did that book you up?
Yes.
Wow.
So within maybe like a week, we decided to shut down our cafe, changed our sign, and said, "No, a cake studio."
Wow. Just like that.
Lunch, we have no breakfast. So people who were lined up, they'd be like, "Wait, what happened?" I'm like, "We're a cake studio now." And they're
Really?
like, "It says cafe out the door." It's your sign. I said, "Well, cafe means coffee." So we just like basically just pretended like it was always that way.
Wow, that's funny.
It was really funny. And then, that's how we started growing. It's 26 years ago.
Wow.
A long time.
And was it all good, or were there any downsides to shifting to that model? Like one thing I would think of is like, well, there's some seasonality to it. People tend to get married in the summer. Was it difficult to like get used to that kind of rhythm of it? And also, you're selling a very extensive product most of the time once. Like I assume they don't, or maybe they would come back and buy a cake on their anniversary, but it's like mostly a one-time purchase as far as the customer goes.
Yeah, well, we started getting customers from like a local hotel bought products from us. The military did.
So more repeat customers then.
Yes. And there was like a casino. So this kind of, it kind of evened out.
Okay. Yeah.
Still, when you're charging $5 with
Right.
that's a loss every transaction.
Right.
It didn't matter. So what we did, we just like tightened our bootstraps. Like actually, speaking of bootstraps, I actually read a book by Tim Ferriss. Wait, was it Tim Ferriss? No, who wrote the book? Oh, no, it wasn't Tim Ferriss. Who wrote the Bootstrap Bible?
Bootstrap Bible. I don't know. I don't know.
Oh my God, not Seth Godin.
Okay, got it. Okay.
So I found his book at the library.
Uh-huh.
And I read that like 20 times, and that's got through it all. I highly recommend that book.
What was that like shifting from this, losing money on each $5 sale to selling, multi-$100 cake?
It was great.
Yeah.
It was great. And it also was in alignment with who we were, because you could tell that we really loved that.
Say more about that.
So I think a lot of times when you do something that's in alignment with who you are, there's a lot of ease around it, and there's a lot of joy, and people can sense it. Versus people, like when you're not in alignment, the level of like resentment shows.
Did your sister join the business from the get-go?
Yeah, she moved with me. She was 18. And so she moved with me and she started going to school. And then when my brother and I, this is a downside of going into business with a family member. My brother left the business 10 months later. We are always like kind of love-hate. And he left the business. And so my sister stopped going to college and she became my business partner. And my first cousin, Wallace, who was baking on Guam for our bakery there, our family bakery there, he moved and became our baker. And
quite a family affair.
Yeah, so it's been the three of us. And then my husband still.
Is he in the business?
Yeah. But he's a teacher. He teaches, he taught for all of this entire time. But he was just during the weekends, he would help. And, if things needed to be fixed, it's just really good to have partners, to have a good team. And we have been a good team. We have been together for 25 years.
Wow. 9/11, you were in Las Vegas at a bakery show on 9/11.
Yeah.
And your daughter was there. She was 11 months old. You were going to the show for the first time when you saw the terror attack on the television. What did you do next?
So we went to Las Vegas. It was our first trip. We started making money. So we went to the International Baking Expo in Las Vegas, which happens every 4 years. And we were super excited. We were staying at what is the one that's the tallest, cheapest hotel at the very end of the strip? Stratosphere.
Okay. Stratosphere,
And
yeah.
then we went to the first day of the show. The second day of the show in the morning, I went to I saw on TV that there was a plane had just crashed into the Twin Towers, one of the first planes. So the first instinct was pack everyone up, let's go. And we didn't have any news at all what was happening. My baby was only 11 months old. My daughter, who's now the director of marketing, she was our 11-month-old baby. There were, my sister, her husband, and my cousin. I said, let us pack up and let's bring that gigantic car that we rented back to Washington. We're not flying. And they're just like, wait, we're going to the show today. I was like, no, we're not. We're going home today. We don't even know how many planes are in the sky. Like I had this instinctive thought that it was going to be disastrous. So
Why do you think, what was it that caused you to have that feeling?
I have a really good sense, like I have really good intuition. And I also have, I think, a real sense of like survival instinct. Plus I had a baby. So that was a lot of, I was very on high alert because just thinking I need to take care of this baby. This baby needs to be safe. Safest place is to be home. So we went down, checked out of our hotel. We didn't ask for permission. We just took the car and everybody else was still gambling. It was 9 a.m., Pacific time. We got to, we loaded up the car with a lot of water and food and anything that we can do to survive getting stuck in Death Valley because we had to drive through that. And, there were no cell phones.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So we just drove out of the desert. I'm like, the best thing was for us to drive into the middle of the desert because if there's massive attacks and tallest buildings, being in the stratosphere is a bad idea.
Yeah.
So just go in the middle of the desert.
Right.
It'll be hard to hit us. And then by the time we got to the middle of the desert, that plane in Philadelphia wasn't in Philadelphia? Yeah. Philadelphia, there was a plane that had just crashed.
Yeah.
And people were frantically looking for ways out of cities. And so we got home and, 3 days later, we had a wedding show and we went to the wedding show.
Wow.
It was really pretty incredible. And every single, IBIE every 4 years, we go there and all the people who've been in the industry for the longest time, we talk about that. We're like, remember? When that happened and
right.
9/11 happened.
Right.
The show was
just had that instinct to go home. I'm wondering if that instinct has served you well in the business and in other ways where you have this kind of intuition for if something is not working out to act quickly.
I think so. Yeah. I would think so.
Yeah. It's a good one to have in business, right?
Yeah, it also helps because I meditate every day.
Yeah, let's talk about that. I know meditation, mindfulness is kind of a really important part of who you are. It relates to baking also. So talk a little bit about how you discovered that.
So when I was younger, I was raised Catholic. So a lot of reverence for and being prayerful came from that, right? Because being raised Catholic, I went to Catholic school all my life. And then when I was a teenager, I had a really tragic loss of a friend. And after that, maybe it was a trauma response where I was wanting to know why that happened. And I just kept praying a lot. And, basically that whole intention of understanding why tragedies happen led me to different modalities of prayer. And one of that became meditation. And that has been my go-to. So for the past, 35 years, I've been meditating. And that has really helped, just helps me a lot. it calms my nervous system. It clarifies my mind. I understand things greater. Doesn't mean I'm still super flawed in so many different ways, but it allows me to just kind of give myself some grace and maybe other people grace. And it's still a journey,
You,
but it's practice, right? It's a practice.
yeah. You came from poverty. You didn't have any privilege. You didn't have any opportunities, immigrant. Um, and you've said that meditation helped you to manifest the life that you have now. Because now obviously you're a member of EO, run multi-million dollar businesses. Talk a little bit about how meditation plays into that.
Yeah, a lot of it is putting myself and, maybe because I grew up in not the most, ideal way for a child to grow up, that I always had this penchant for imagining things, imagining a better place. Like, I always imagined being in like in the middle of the Sound of Music, for example. So if things are not going well, I would just close my eyes and I'm in the middle of the Sound of Music. I'm in the middle of flowers. And
Hmm.
I've always been a very imaginative child, maybe as a trauma response, maybe not. I'm not sure. But I think it is. I think it was more of a trauma response. And a lot of kids do that when there's just so much, there's so much like input that the brain, a young brain, can't really process. So I would imagine things. Well, what happened was the things that I imagined actually came true. Like I ended up, in Switzerland in the middle of that field. And, and a lot of people can attest that they really, you imagine something like as if it's real, it happens.
Yeah.
And I have always just used that
Hmm.
in a lot of different ways. So when things are not going well, instead of like, diving into this like, deep hole of, sadness and helplessness, I end up creating like, what would it be like if this was my ideal? If it was everything was possible, what would it be like? And then it happens.
And, the food business, bakery business is really hard. Just looking at the last few years, there have been so many restaurants, food businesses that have gone out of business. It's just a hard business to be in. Does the meditation help you to kind of keep everything level as you're, navigating this industry?
Yeah, it is a very hard business, and a lot of people, it comes and goes. Like the whole business is in a flux. You work with really tight margins. It's very commercialized. A lot of it is, you're competing with mass producers. So small businesses like ours, it's very rare to be in business for this long. And a lot of it though is that we really enjoy what we do, and joy emanates, right? I just recently made a new friend in Tucson who's a she's a biologist, an RNA biologist. She works for the Astrobio lab, and she has a PhD from MIT and Harvard,
Smart cookie.
and she's super smart. And what I found fascinating in her research, she told me that when you love something, your cells actually emanate light. They emanate light when you're around people that you love, when you do something that you love, when you are uplifted by good music, your cells just emanate light.
Mm,
And that light is energy, right? So
mm,
a lot of it is that you can tell when food is made with love. You
mm,
can tell when a chef loves what they do. It just tastes better. It tastes good, even if the servings are so tiny. And when food is not made with love or with resentment, you can tell.
mm.
And it's actually not good for your gut either. So I think one of the main reasons why we have lasted this long is because we absolutely love what we do. We go through so much. There's like so many different things that happen throughout the day or the week that could just be so like demoralizing.
Mhm.
But we really like what we do. And there's so many happy things. There's so many fun things. There's a lot of laughter. There's a lot of creativity. There's a lot of, who is sad making a cake, right?
Mm,
Like it's freaking fun. Like I
mm,
can say that.
mhm.
And my kids can attest to it too. Like my daughter, she left, she is now working for us. She just totally enjoys what she does.
Mm.
Absolutely enjoys it. And, and people are happy. People are just happy to meet you. It's
Eh,
not,
Yeah, I love that. I
like I
love
make
that.
cake. They're like, oh my God. Then yeah,
Um,
it's a friend.
we were talking earlier about your reaction to 9/11. Well, in 2020, January 2020, you had a friend who was visiting from Hong Kong who said that, this is going to come to the US at a time
Yeah.
when a lot of people didn't think that was going to happen falsely. Talk a little bit about what your reaction was like after that.
Yeah, so I have a childhood friend who lives in Hong Kong, and she's a really smart cookie as well. She owns a hedge fund, and she's super smart.
Oh.
She came to visit Seattle to speak to our chapter about her hedge fund, and she was frantically looking for masks, and she said, this is going to happen, and this is going to come to the U.S. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can see that. Like, and I saw the concern in her eyes. Like, I was like, I can see that. Well, I ended up going to Hawaii to the Regional Leadership Academy for EO. And that was always present in my mind that like, I hope they don't shut down borders. And this is before, like, I hope they don't shut down the airports because, you don't know if what happens during a pandemic. And, by the end of it, the first case happened in Seattle.
Mm.
So I flew home, and that was by March 12th or 16th or something, I
Hmm.
started seeing like it's spreading. And then my employees were like, I live with my grandma, or like my
Mm.
mom's sick. So then I just woke up one morning and I told my sister that I think we need to shut down. So I shut down the business. I told everyone, like, you know what, we're going to figure out how to pay you. And, you know, um, we didn't know what furlough was before because we've never furloughed anyone. We've never
Yeah.
hired anybody. So we're like, okay, we're just going to have to figure this out. But as of right now, your health is the most important thing and your family members. So we gave all of our inventory away. We shut everything down. And within a couple of days, the whole county shut down. Um, so, and we stayed home.
And you went home and you started meditating.
I did. I started meditating 3 hours a day.
Wow.
I would sit down meditation, and then I would do walking meditations. And, I'd walk 5 miles and I was meditating the entire time. I just basically just let it go. And I was also grieving. My brother had passed away a few months before. So I was
Mm.
dealing with that too. So that allowed me to just really like, really heal. And it was a bit of a gift. And it was also quite incredible in that, it took us like a month to recover. And by, within a month or two, we were up and running again. And the demand just grew because grocery stores were very busy and our business just took off.
Um, did you have to shift the business because were you from like, making wedding cakes? There were
Yeah.
for a while people weren't doing weddings.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So we did a lot of wholesale. So we have a brand called Dragonfly Cakes, is their little pedophores. And, we distribute them nationally. And, we had a small distribution at that time. And then our distribution just grew, and that took over for all of the parts that we're not running yet, the
Mm.
events. So that really helped us.
Mm.
And we've got to bring back our employees. And, it turned out great. And I could really attribute that to like a calm mind,
Mm.
not too reactive, not too afraid. And, I'm just going to say I'm naturally an anxious person. So, I mean, I have to meditate. I mean, people who don't have, maybe people who haven't gone through like trauma or
Yeah.
are in their disposition, it just works for me just
Yeah.
because I'm naturally an anxious person.
And your father also got cancer and you had to care for him for 9 years in the midst of running your business.
Yeah, my father was
Um,
sick and my mother had a stroke, and we kept our business running. We took care of him at home. Like we only shut down, luckily our team was amazing. My sister and I work really well together, and kudos to my sister. She has such a good head on her shoulders too. She's amazing and strong. And she runs our business with like such a tight ship as a tight ship. And we had a great team who helped. But yeah, we had to go through the death, the illness and death of my father, my mother's stroke, my sister's, giving birth to our children, raising our children, all throughout this business. Hasn't been easy, I must just say, but it's been an adventure.
Yeah.
I could say that.
Yeah. And you've also, in the midst of this, you've acquired other businesses. Dragonfly Cakes, I believe, was an acquisition.
Yeah.
And then now you've acquired, bringing you back to Tucson, acquired a tea house and event space in Tucson. So talk a little bit about that, kind of coming back to your roots.
Yeah. So we acquired a company called Wax Orchards, and it was a chocolate fudge company, and we still have it. But when sometimes you fail and sometimes you succeed. Well, this was I'm not going to say failure. It just didn't work out. Mm-hmm. So, selling chocolate fudge in jars to companies like Target at 5% margin is not a good business model. It's a really good one. So we shut it down. And then 6 months later, we purchased Dragonfly Cakes, which is a Pettifor's company. They're tiny little cakes that are covered with chocolate, and they're delicious. Yeah. And so that is the company that we distribute nationally, and that was an acquisition as well. So that
why that of all the different types of companies you could acquire?
Well, we knew it. It was within our vertical. So I also knew all of the equipment. I'm a big bakery equipment nerd. Okay. I knew how to make the things, but chocolate fudge, we were outsourcing that. So a lot of the things that are in cans in the middle aisle of a grocery store, a lot of that is made by co-manufacturers. And that's what we did. Our chocolate fudge was co-manufactured. So I would order, $50,000 worth of fudge. So and, it's just sitting in the warehouse. It's either sitting in the warehouse or you're waiting to get paid. So it's like a lot of money sitting around. So Dragonfly Cakes is something that we manufacture, and we know how to do it. We had really great help with an organization called Impact Washington in Washington State that helped us. So, if you're a manufacturer and you have local resources that can help you with your production, I would highly suggest using that, because that really helped us, just get things going and kind of figure out all the kinks and start producing and start shipping fairly quickly, from acquisition to full production. It took us maybe 8 weeks. It was quick. And we moved it from California. So we moved all of the whole facility to California, from California to Washington.
Was that hard?
That was an adventure.
That must have been hard to do.
Oh, it was quite an adventure.
Yeah.
Because we needed to get it up and running before the 1st of January, which we did.
Do you load up trucks and drive them up?
Yeah. We packaged everything. The seller created, she didn't really tell her customers that the whole facility was moving. So she was bulking up their inventory and then packing everything up, shipping the whole thing to us. We frantically put it all together and started testing. And then we had 6 weeks to be up and running. Wow. And we did. We started shipping in 6 weeks. It was a mess.
When was that acquisition?
That was in 2016.
So it was a couple of years before COVID. So in retrospect, it helped to diversify your business going into COVID. Yeah.
Yeah, it really did. Everything just, works out. So
it's fascinating sometimes when businesses do that, they don't even realize that diversification may have saved their business going into some big, pandemic.
Yeah. I mean, there's things are never the same, right? So I think there's always, the only constant is change. So that's something that we are very aware of. It's like, you know what? Yeah. This is not going to stay the same. It might be really awesome right now. And that's one of the things that has always been on my mind. Like, we don't live extravagant lives just because you don't know, like small business owners, you can't go buy a Ferrari, Right. You just can't like that. I'm in a food business. Maybe if I was someone in another business, I would, but I just live a very simple kind of, low key life.
You mentioned with the chocolate fudge that it was too outside of your wheelhouse, and you acquired a tea house and event space. What have been some of the learnings or challenges around that? And also one that is in, quite a distance from where you live in Washington State.
Yeah, so my daughter went to the University of Arizona, and I absolutely love this town.
Hmm.
And we just happened to have this venue it was already ready to go. It just needed to be loved. So I'm a big gardener. So a lot of it is because I love to garden and I wanted to revive the garden. And that was my thing. Like I want this garden to go.
So you
Like
bought the business so that you could revive the garden.
I was buying this, buy a garden, and I was going to have a bakery
That was
too,
a good fixer for you.
kind of a fixer.
Yeah.
But it turned out that it is quite a task.
The garden or the bakery or the business or
Well, the
all?
garden was really hard because, a desert garden is very different from
Yeah, very
Pacific
different.
Northwest garden where it rains all the time. So I'm an expert in drought tolerant ground covers now. And
Yeah.
I know how to, I know a lot of things about a lot of things, a little bit
Yeah.
about a lot of things right now. And we started doing high tea, which is the reason why is because a lot of our customers are tea shops because we sell these pedophores and, tea shops have
Hmm.
they buy our pedophores. So we started going around going to high tea. And I was like, you know what? If I were to have my own high tea, I'm going to give everybody food, like lots of food.
Hmm.
And so my kids and I did a brainstorm and we decided on the name. And then we decided on the business model. And we said, let's do high tea, but let's make it Filipino high tea. So I was,
Mm.
and my mother still, I still have family who live in the Philippines. My mother lives, my mother and my brother were living in Cebu. So I was visiting them and,
Is high tea a big thing over there?
it's called merienda.
Okay.
So it's really out of our own brains. It's an exercise in creativity.
Okay. And
And
so, and you had mentioned when you went to University of Arizona, it was very white. Did you
yeah.
find that bringing this Filipino high tea tradition to Tucson, or maybe Tucson's more diverse now than it was when you went there, but did you find that it was difficult finding customers for it, or did you find that because it was something different, people were excited about
Yeah.
it?
I find people in Tucson very warm and welcoming. There's actually a big Filipino community, and Filipino culture is very similar to Hispanic culture,
Hmm.
and the palate is very similar.
Hmm.
So it's been really fun and great.
Yeah.
And I found an amazing team that we work with, and it's been really quite fun.
Yeah.
I must
It's
say,
kind of a bit of a dying tradition, I have to say, because my wife loves nothing more than going to tea. She loves going with friends to a tea shop experience, like multiple hours, little tea cakes, all that kind
yes,
of
yes,
stuff. But we've been together for like 25 years, but I feel like now we have kids and everything, but she's had trouble like finding that a lot of tea shops have gone out of business.
yeah. It's
It just
not a
seems like the
very
tradition is not around as much.
Well, it's not a very easy business model. It's really a lot of work. I
Yeah.
mean, I think the regular high teas like they offer at the Empress in Victoria is probably I think the cost of
Yeah.
goods for that is super cheap.
Yeah.
It really is about what the cost
Experience.
of maintaining the
Yeah.
experience,
Yeah.
all the stuff around you.
Yeah.
That's what costs a lot. But I made it harder in that we actually make hot food. So
Mm.
we have four courses of warm Filipino food, right?
Oh, cool.
That normal high teas would never have. They
Yeah.
would have warm food. It's
Right.
always just sandwiches. So that has helped, in differentiating us, but it's
Yeah.
also made it hard to really scale. It's not like I want to be cooking, every single day. I don't want to be a chef. Like I don't,
Yeah.
although I love to cook, it's a whole different story when you're cooking for a mass number of people
Yeah.
consistently.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I do have a chef who cooks for us now that I've taught him how to cook a Filipino dishes that I created, but he cooks it consistently in commercial kitchens. Like I
Hmm.
cook at home.
Yeah.
Small stove. I didn't even know how to turn on the freaking grill, like
Yeah.
didn't even know what a flat top was. So I'm learning a lot, and that's what makes it quite fun for me. It's the when I think it's every entrepreneur maybe, when you're learning is, like steep, it's so exciting. And
Yeah.
then when it starts to even out, then you're like, okay, what's my next project?
Right.
Yeah, I'm sure you understand.
For sure. So this has been great, Odette. And circling back to the mindfulness and meditation we were talking about earlier, before we wrap up, are there any resources that you would point anyone listening to this who is curious about meditation, where they could, learn about it or how they could get started?
Yeah. So I would, if for any entrepreneur, I think the most important thing that I did was go on a silent retreat. There's one right outside of you, John, in San Francisco.
Spirit Rock?
Spirit Rock.
Yeah, it's like 20 minutes to the west of me. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the best. And then I also go to a lot of different other retreats. I've gone to Joe Dispenza retreats because he's from the Pacific Northwest, and it's very different, and that's very active. It's super fun. It's more of like, putting yourself in a trance and basically creating, whereas Spirit Rock is more of, I would say, heart surgery. You're quiet, you don't talk to anyone for a week, you don't look people in the eye, you don't write, you don't do anything except really look inward. And, between the two, I would say that it's been transformative for me. And I also, now that I'm older, I seek to meditate with community. So if there's a group that, I can meditate with, I participate in that in whatever modality, right? And when we travel, my kids and my family, we're very much into going to churches, like especially Catholic churches is familiar. Both my kids, we raised them Catholic. We love that. I mean, any type of activity that, gives you a sense of reverence of what is beyond the body is really helpful. I mean, I think to stay connected to the whole reality that, basically our life is an adventure and it's all an illusion. By the time we pass away, that is what's permanent. You're in Bhutan with EO, Asia Pacific, which is I'm a part of. And what I love about that culture, it's a Buddhist culture, which, I'm a practicing Buddhist, although I was raised Catholic. It's Buddhism is a practice. They live for the other world, for the next life, and so that's why they're kind to other people. They're kind to each other, and they really take into account how their actions impact other people. And in that way, they're mindful with every action that they do. They're not necessarily, I'm meditating. It is that every act is a meditative act. And that is what I'm, working on and practicing.
Yeah. Well, Odette, this has been great. Where can people go to learn more about you and Celebrity Gourmet and Dragonfly Cakes and Hamaya Garden?
Well, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, or you can send me an email at Odette@Celebrity Gourmet. I'm hoping to, do more things that are in alignment with my mindfulness journey and along with business. So stay tuned for that.
Great. Odette, thanks so much.
Thanks. Thanks, John. Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Top Business Leaders Show, powered by Rise 25. Visit rise25.com to check out more episodes of the show and to learn more about how you can start your own podcast.